Okay, I think we are here. Yes, live. Sound seems to be on. So cool. It's another beautiful Saturday here in Austin in the Bitcoin Mecca. So I'm just here at PlebLab. I'm in our new streaming room here. Still breaking it in, I suppose, but there will be people gathering around this room for the NextJS coming up soon. Our monthly NextJS meetup here. So there's always double scheduling, but super excited to have been putting this together. Kind of actually for another project. I put together this example project and at first thought it was a really pretty deep topic. And as I got into it, I figured out this is something I think we can break down pretty simple and make into pretty clean workshop here. So that's going to be my goal today. And it's going to be all about Lightning login. So yeah, let's get into it. So I guess first and foremost, I've got these slides here that I threw together pretty last minute, but I want to make sure that you all can get to them. So I'm gonna make this a tiny URL really quick. Copy link. Enter URL, make a tiny URL. And our alias will be lightning-login. Did I spell that right? Yeah, okay. Cool. So there we go. Let me take that and I'll just make slides. There we go. So yes, you can find the slides here to follow along. The slides, they will have code in them this time, so if you just want to kind of copy pasta and go along with me, be best to go here. But I also, on my GitHub here, I have the completed project called LNURL-AAUTH example on my GitHub, Austin Kelsey. So yeah, this is essentially the same example we're going to be building step by step, but I guess we're going to talk about the theory and some of the setup and some of the ideas first and foremost that go behind LNURL and this login flow, and I guess a few other things that end up in this basket. But should I start with the full demo project, or I don't know, let's see if I have it here. Yeah, this is the full demo. So yeah, let's actually show this off real quick. npm run dev. So that's what we're going to be building. Got this localhost 3000 that's working now, and actually I need to do something special that we're going to go over later using a tool called ngrok. I'm going to ngrok http localhost 3000. I basically need to take my local server here and make it globally available so that I can sign in with my Lightning wallet. So we can copy this. Oops. And this is what we'll be doing with our finished project, but just want to show you what we're going to build first and foremost. So I'll go to this special ngrok URL, and here is the project. Loads up. Let me move this on my way on the screen. Sweet, there we go. So I'm going to get my wallet now. I'll use Phoenix wallet here. I can just open this up. You can see Phoenix, and I'll just go to the send tab here, and I'm going to scan this. And so we see when I scan it, it gives me this really long, gross ngrok URL, and it's asking me if I want to log in. So I'm going to say yes to log in, and then it will call back here, and then boom, I'm signed in, and this website has my pub key basically to use as my username, right? So it can be that simple right there. So this is the final product of what we're going to build today. But once you have this LNURL-AAUTH flow, it's really powerful. You can kind of just stick it anywhere. It's very generic in a sense that how you will use it in a project, you can just kind of copy paste it across different projects and use different session libraries, use different tools, whatever you need to do. This will kind of fit into that because it's doing just very standard, server stuff, just creating a URL, you're verifying a challenge that's signed with someone's private key, and we'll kind of walk through that. We'll kind of walk through that in full. So, yeah, let's get into it. What's up, Jose? So, once again, the slides can be found here. So, yeah, and I can jump back to these later if anyone needs to get to it. But yeah, let's get started. So this is, I guess, the simple overview for this workshop. What is LNURL? What is LNURL-AAUTH? A breakdown of the LNURL flow, and then we're going to build it, right? So pretty simple. We'll get into some slightly other topics here, but I'll try not to rant too much. So, what is LNURL? This is it's a simple answer, but it's kind of a big one at the same time. I have some bullet points here, but I mean just for visuals right off the bat, you can go here to LNURL on GitHub /LUDs, and LUDs are kind of like the BIPs or the improvement proposals. It's just a different name for the same thing. And so there are these different LUDs. And then LUD1 is going to be the base spec, I guess what you would call it. A designation of what LNURL really is. And so it tells us that it's a Bech32 encoded HTTPS or onion URL that can be interacted with automatically by a wallet in a standard way such that a service can provide extra services or a better experience for the user. So that's kind of interesting. It's basically we're getting some Bech32 encoded URL that will interact with the wallet somehow and let us do more things. That's really, that's kind of it. That's kind of what LNURL is. There's some trade-offs, some considerations, some requirements, but it's basically just a simple format. It's nothing crazy or innovative. It's just a simple format that people have adopted and gone around to extend these Lightning services with a server. And that's what LNURL adds. It's kind of a requirement to LNURL, is an additional server that you have to do some kind of action. And that's what we'll be doing today in NextJS, which allows us to kind of have a front end, a client side, and a server side kind of environment in one project here. And so I guess just to touch on my bullet points, so it's a special web address that helps Bitcoin wallets and services work together. It makes using Bitcoin services easier and more enjoyable. I think that's true to say. It can be written with uppercase or lowercase letters, but QR codes should use uppercase. So LNURL is almost always encoded in a QR code. Not really encoded, right? I guess QR is like an encoding, but you essentially just take what the LNURL is, which is a string, and you drop it into this QR code so that the user can scan it, because the user is usually interacting with LNURL from some kind of mobile wallet, and that will definitely be the case today. So different LNURLs, they have tags, and the tag is kind of to say what is this kind of LNURL I'm scanning here, so your wallet knows. So if there's a tag in the address, it means LNURL has a special purpose. If there's no tag, the wallet sends a request to get more information about what to do. So that's kind of interesting there. I don't know how many cases that comes up in, but you know, we're going to be using a very standard case here. I still do very standard stuff with LNURL. So let's see, we can use regular web links, HTTPS, or private ones. So you can use your, you know, .onion, v2, v3 links, which is cool. It can also work with other types of web addresses. And it doesn't care about technical details, like status codes, content type. Just focuses on that actual, just that information in the string, the actual LNURL. So yeah, I mean, that's really what this is. We're baking special instructions into a string that our wallet will be able to interpret. And for auth, for login, we're going to be baking in instructions for essentially signing into our service. So yes, I guess specs, consideration, and adoption. I wrote these bullet points just for me to kind of riff off of some of these ideas, because there's a lot of interesting debate and interesting ideas just around specs like LNURL. If you're big into Nostr, these things will make sense to you. And of course, PlebDevs created Nostr and he created LNURL. You know, what a legend. But he manages the specs in very similar ways, and not everyone likes it. It's a strange world, right? A strange world of specs. Essentially, you know, PlebDevs created a README, and he's like, hey, here's a standard, or here's an idea, here's a way you could do this thing that everyone wants to do. So I'm going to put it out there, and maybe I'll even implement it into my own product, and I'm going to try and get people to adopt it, get people to implement my standard. And that's kind of what this spec war is about. And this is happening on Nostr like crazy as well, where, you know, maybe everyone in Nostr world, they adhere to NIP 1, they adhere to the base spec or what defines Nostr, but then there's all these other NIPs, all these other different parts of the spec that are partially adopted, and maybe some people will like it, maybe some people think it should be different. So it's a strange world. All this stuff is still being figured out in real time. People are coming to consensus. Different services are adopting these, and we see in this screenshot here, I'm showing you, these are the wallets or the services that support the first 4 pieces of the LNURL spec, which is the base spec, what we just looked at. There's a channel request spec, which is really interesting. I still haven't tried it. A withdrawal request, which is very unique to Lightning. And then we've got the auth base spec, and that's the one we'll be looking in today. And so we see a lot of wallets already support these, so pretty decent adoption. Yes, you can have the link to the presentation. I've got it right here. I put it on a tiny URL here at the last minute. So someone's just asking for the link here in the chat. So tinyurl.com/lightninglogin. Yes, so still at the beginning here, still I guess just talking around these ideas. So yeah, the strange world of specs. I guess I kind of talked about that. You know, everything is still up in the air. And I guess one other thing to mention, you know, LNURL, it's just a spec, but you can break the spec. You can bend the rules. You can decide to have your LNURL do something that's not supported, you know, on the spec. It's just software. You're just interpreting a string, right, and initiating some action on it. It's hard because you need to implement your custom thing on the server and on the wallet. So there's 2 parties involved here. This is why we're still coming to consensus around these things. So LNURL versus Bolt 12, I guess this is one of the big, it's not a controversy, but just debates in the space around these different specs. LNURL and Bolt 12 are trying to solve similar types of problems, where I guess maybe the most obvious way to put it would be, how do I just pay someone with Lightning without them needing to create an invoice first? This is one of the main first use cases, right? So both LNURL and Bolt 12 allow you to do that. But you know, the thing is, like, Bolt 12 it's still very early. The first implementations are still coming together. And LNURL, it was able to be created so fast because it was so simple. This is kind of the genius of Fiat Joff and why he's good at this stuff. He just creates a very simple spec that you can just build in like an hour, and it just works. And so why LNURL versus Bolt 12? A lot of people have trouble with LNURL or they don't like it because you need to run a server. You're basically reliant on a server somewhere in the mix here. Like for example, in with our login, we're going to be hosting a server, at least a few endpoints that the wallet will be calling back to in order for this login flow that we're going to do. So that's just an example. So, you know, some people are anti-LNURL or anti-Bolt 12 or whatever. I like them both. They're both going to exist, and the best one will win out, maybe, or maybe they'll both still be around. Who really knows? But today you can build cool stuff with LNURL, and there's, as we have down here, a lot of wallets that will support it. So that's awesome. And so, yeah, I mentioned LNURL support right here, and I've got a link which goes to, yeah, it goes to this page. This is, no, not this page. Well, it's one. Awesome LNURL. That's where it takes you. So Awesome LNURL, it has a bunch of different just highlights of projects that people have done. A lot of this isn't even loading on the internet here. But the main thing I'm usually looking at is the list of supported wallets or the list of services and libraries. And so you could go down here and, yeah, like kind of see everything that I was showing off before, and see that there's a lot of pieces of this spec. There's a lot of kind of features that you could play with that exist, that people support. So that is pretty cool. Yeah, and then there's different libraries, development tools, which is nice. But and there's even something like, do they have Lightning login on here? Lightning.video. There were some websites about Lightning login, but I don't know. I found them difficult to work with personally, or I found other people's implementations of LNURL-AAUTH a little bit difficult to work with. But let's actually talk about that. What's the auth spec specifically? So what is the auth spec specifically? And I'm blocking part of this right now. So it's a secure and user-friendly login method for Bitcoin services. It uses a special key called the linking key to log in or authorize actions without revealing the user's identity. So you can think of this linking key, and there's going to be this linking private key. These are these fancy terms that we really effectively can boil down, as PlebDevs at least. We can boil this down to be like public private key. If you understand the basic ideas behind public and private key encryption, and maybe even like signing messages with your private key and proving it with your public key, this is all the crypto stuff that LNURL-AAUTH involves. It's just your Lightning wallet will do kind of something a little bit fancy to not fully just raw expose its private key, I guess. You could think of it in that way. So we have this special key called the linking key. It links us to the service from our wallet without doxing us, essentially. And instead of traditional login credentials, the service, us, our app, will display a QR code containing an LNURL for authentication. So the wallet, it scans a QR code, it displays a login dialog just like I showed you before, shows you the domain, and it'll say, hey, this domain wants you to log in, is that fine? Okay, yes. And when I approve that, my wallet will basically sign this key, sign this challenge, and it will send it over to the service to basically be like, hey, look, here's my public key, and here's this thing I just signed that proves that I own the private key to this public key. And then the service is kind of like, okay, let me verify this with my own function. Oh, okay, it looks authentic. Well, you must be the owner of this private key to this public key, so I'll log you in and I'll just hold on to the public key. Essentially that's the flow, but we're gonna break into this I guess, a little bit more. Anything else that I want to mention here? No, I think that's about covers that. So I made this diagram here to try and like simplify and give you some kind of a mental model of what's happening here. And so let's just ignore the words, all the words here on the screen, and let's just like step through this, and I'll give you my ad hoc example. So the first thing is first, we have an app, we have some kind of server here, and we are going to create a valid LNURL encoded string. And inside of that LNURL string, we're going to have something called a K1. And this K1 is essentially, it's a challenge. That's another way that they say it. But really, it's a randomly generated 32-bit string. That's all it is. So it's a random kind of key that we just created randomly. And we're putting that inside of, we're baking all of this into this string. There's the LNURL kind of basic stuff. There's this challenge or this K1 that we just baked up that we're going to send to you. And we also have a callback URL, and that's important. And the callback URL is going to say to the wallet, like, hey, once you sign this, call back to me here, right? So we bake all of this into our special QR code, and that's step one. And step two, the Lightning wallet will scan that QR code. It'll interpret, of course, if it supports the spec, it will interpret that LNURL, recognize it, and be like, oh, okay, this is a login. Let me display where it's coming from. Let me display where, we're gonna call back to, and I'll ask the user if they wanna log in. And then as soon as I hit that login button, we go into step three. So step two, my Lightning wallet, actually step two, I am hitting the login button, right? So my Lightning wallet is scanning the QR code, it's interpreting it, it sees it's a login, and so it signs that K1, it signs that challenge with the private key. And then in step three, after it signs it, it calls back to the callback URL that we baked inside of our QR code, and it sends the signed K1 and the public key. And those are the only two pieces of information we get as the service. We get the public key, we get the K1 that has been signed. And this is going into step four here now. What do we do with that information? Well, since we have the public key and we know what our K1 was, we know what random thing we generated, we can tell just with the public key that, hey, the private key that belongs with this public key definitely signed this random challenge that we sent them. So we can cryptographically prove that our random challenge was signed by the private key to this public key without ourselves having the private key. Does that kind of make sense? So that's just like the cool little crypto trick that's happening here, is like we're able to send a challenge and make you prove that you own a public and private key, and then you can prove that to us without us getting anything except for the public key and this little proof, this little challenge that we create along with it. And so that's the final step 5 here. The server saves the pub key as the user's identity and the K1 as their temporary authorization. So that challenge that they signed, the K1, you could think of that, we save that as the session, and you could think of the pub key, we save that as our user's username. So the K1 will continue, so this might be my first sign up flow here. I sign up for the first time, but then in the future, I'm already signed up. So my public key, you could think it's like saved in the database, essentially. I can sign back in, and my public key will stay the same, but the K1 will be replaced because I'm going to get a new challenge, I'm going to sign it, and then it'll replace the K1 that's currently there. So that's why you can kind of think of it as a session. So, okay, was that a lot? This is kind of a lot, I know. It was actually funny, as I was preparing for my Bitcoin talk, one of the templates I was preparing, I needed to build an LNURL-AAUTH flow, and I had never done it before. And I was like, yeah, this will be pretty easy. This will be pretty simple. But it took me like a week, so I kind of became an expert over the course of the week, a little bit, or I guess a PlebDev expert. So I'm trying to break this down simple, but hopefully this flow somewhat makes sense, and at least hopefully the code will make sense, because I separated it in such a way to where you can really see these steps kind of playing out across the code base. Cool. So yeah, let's build it. Let's build our Lightning login implementation. So I have the link to the completed project that I kind of showed off before, which is right here. And I think, yep, I have a walkthrough here, which I threw this together last night, so we'll just walk through it, and I should be able to like basically recreate this same project from scratch that I demoed at the beginning. And yeah, we'll see what happens with that. So let's get started. Obviously, I think it goes without saying at this point, like any of these live workshops I do, you do need to have Node installed. And when you have Node, that's where you get npm and npx, these just different ways of, calling an install, or here we're going to call npx for basically creating a new Next app. So let's do that. I'm going to turn on my brightness here. So go to my desktop here, make sure I don't have another, yeah. And I'm going to do npx create next app at latest, and that at latest will basically just say, give me the latest version. And it's going to ask me a few questions here. First of all, what is my project name? I'm just going to call it LNURL-AAUTH-live. Do I want TypeScript? No. Do I want ESLint? Yes. Tailwind? No. Do I want to add sources a directory? Yes. App router? Definitely yes. And then it asks me if I want an import alias. We don't need to know most of this stuff. No. So this is just kind of project configuration before it creates the project for you. So should just take a second. Cool. And I'm going to go find what I call it, LNURL-AAUTH. Go drag this in here. And I've got my working project in case we need to jump over to that at any point, but I think this should go pretty straightforward. So now I'm going to run npm I and npm run dev in here just to make absolutely sure that it works. Oh, 3001, I must have another server running. Yeah, I've got this one running from before, so I'll turn that off. So it is running. Shut that, that was the one from before. Is my internet going slow? What's happening here? Waiting, compiling page and server. That took 10 seconds. Wow. Okay, well, it runs though. So this is kind of our, default little create React app equivalent that it generates for us here. So we know it works. So let's move on. So now we need to install these packages. Yeah, and these packages are pretty standard, except for this one right here. This one, we are installing it at a specific version. So this is kind of important. Like, I only know how to use this library at this version, which is 1.6.0. And so this is just one of our crypto libraries. @Noble. It's this guy that builds a lot of useful crypto libraries that people in Bitcoin use. And when I say crypto, I mean like literally cryptography, right? And so SCCP 256K1 is a kind of a hashing function, I think, or something like that. I don't know. I learned this in base 58. I need to brush up and remember, but we're going to be using it for our authorization, or authorizing that our challenge was signed with the private key. So that's going to be cool. So I'm just going to install all of these. I'll probably just do it all in one command if I can remember them. So I'll stop this. I'll do npm I Axios. We're doing QR code.react. We're doing Beck32. We're doing NextAuth. And I kind of forgot to talk about NextAuth before, but this is just the library, kind of the standard library from Next.js that we'll be using to store the session, the user's logged in session, right? So LNURL-AAUTH is how we're going to be logging in, but you then need to like persist that login in the browser, be able to tell that the user's logged in. And so that's what we'll be using NextAuth for. And that'll be pretty simple. And then I've got my big library here at Noble SCCP 256K1 at 1.6.0. That specific version. So I think this was everything. Axios. Yep. I believe that should be everything. So looks like it worked here. So let's continue on. We need to create a .env, and we need to add these two variables, and we're going to make them random strings. So I'm going to copy this. New file .env. So next auth secret, and I'm just gonna, this is not a best practice, but I'm just gonna do this right now. Since we're only gonna be local, we're not gonna be doing this in production at all. Yeah, these are basically supposed to be like random kind of generated strings for the next auth stuff. Because we're gonna have JSON web tokens in here, and then we're just gonna have a secret that's encrypting like the whole entire session. So that's what this stuff is for. It's just secrets for us to encrypt, you know, our session information. But that's about all we need. Like the next auth, it'll take care of so much of the stuff in the background, and we're just kind of gonna make a simple configuration, and then we're gonna pass in the user's pub key and their K1. And yeah, the rest will be kind of magic after that. So cool, there's our .env. And as always, I actually forget a lot, but you should go into your git ignore here, and you should just add .env so that you make sure it does not get pushed up. It might already be in here. We've got .env.local. Okay, yeah, well, either way. Add it to be safe. So we've got our two new variables, so now we can get into the actual code. So the first two, let me close this out. First two files we're going to be making are kind of just like utility files that we're going to be using, so a lot of this won't make sense yet. I guess this utils.js one will, because we're just defining two functions, one to encode an LNURL and one to decode, using the Beck32 library. So I'll add this. Excuse me. So we're going to source, and I'm going to make a new file, utils.js. There we go. And then also inside of source, this is interesting. They have a new app. New app page here. What is this? Where is the routes now? Wow. That kind of totally nuked this. One second. I want to try to see if we... what it looks like if we do NextAuth without the latest. LNURL-AAUTH. No. Yes. Maybe it was the new app router, I think. Let's just see what this looks like. Source pages. Okay, this is what we want. So we shouldn't have done at latest, and we should have said no on the on this step. Use an app router. I should have said no. So my bad. They just updated NextJS, so I just want to make sure that I'm following the same structure that my example project was in. So, sorry to make you go through this step again, but yeah, I am going to use this one, this new LNURL-AAUTH one right here. And I'll just take file.env. I'll just copy over my .env. And my utils.js. Cool, and we'll close that out. Next is moving too fast. They're updating too fast. I don't even know. Yeah, because normally here in Next we have a pages directory which actually does our routing. And then when you go into the API directory inside of pages, that does your API routing. So that other newer Next project was structured totally different. So I just didn't really know how it worked. So better to just go with what I know for right now since I'm ripping it live. But okay, cool. So still at the same step here, we made our utils.js or .env. We do need to install these packages again though. So I think I can actually just fly up here at the top and npm install each of these. Yep, there we go. Okay, cool. And back to our slides now. We also have this source map.js here, which we're going to copy. Map.js. And so this will be our database, essentially. This right here is our database. Since I'm wanting to make this a simple example, I don't want us to have to just configure a whole database and deal with all this complexity here. We just want to look at the login flow exclusively. So that's why I'm using this just map. This it's just going to be this persistent object that is going to sit here on our server, and it's just going to act as a database for the one user, which is going to be me, as I'm testing this flow and making sure that it's working. So that is the purpose of map here, and then utils, once again, is encoding and decoding the LNURLs. That's where our functions are. So let's move on. We're going to add the NextAuth session provider in _app. So I'll copy this. So if we go into pages also, we have this _app.js, and this is like a meta component that's I guess for just wrapping logic in mainly versus putting UI inside of it. Like we have an index.js. This is the entry point, the real entry point to our app. But the _app here is kind of just the meta wrapper around the whole app, I guess you could think of. So we paste this in just to have the session provider from NextAuth wrapping around our whole app. So once we do give it a session, it'll kind of be able to give that to us in any component that we want, and we'll be able to use it whenever we want. So that's what we're doing here, kind of just still doing setup and configuration until right here with the LNURL challenge endpoint. Okay. And so there's going to be 3 different endpoints that we're going to create for LNURL that represent these different parts of the flow, right? So the challenge endpoint is going to create the initial QR code with the challenge and the callback inside of it. And then we're going to make the auth endpoint, which will, after the wallet has scanned that challenge, signed it, and then sent it back to the server, this is the endpoint they're going to send it back to. So at first we are making the challenge. Here we're authorizing if the challenge was actually signed. And then the final one will be a /pending endpoint. And this is just an endpoint that we're going to have to pull, or we're going to have to like ask every 2 seconds or something, like, hey, has the user signed the challenge and sent it back to us? Because we don't know when that's going to happen, because it's kind of, I guess, asynchronous process. So those are all the endpoints basically involved in this LNURL-AAUTH flow. So let's start with this challenge one and copy this, and we can look at the code here as I paste it in. So I'm going to go into API. Where do we want to put this? I think just right in the API. So I'm going to make LNURL-challenge.js. Is that what I called it before? Yep. And it was inside of an auth directory though, so I'll do that. Just so we don't break our pathing here. Folder auth. There we go. And yeah, they just give us this hello.js endpoint as like an example. So I'll paste this in, and we can look at this code. It's actually pretty simple. We are grabbing the host, which is our current URL, from the headers here, and we're generating a random challenge, right? Remember when I said we're just going to generate this random 32 bytes, and we're going to look at it, and then we'll know if someone signed it. So that's this generated K1 right here. And then we're able to create the full URL, or the full callback URL. This is where the wallet is going to call us back from. And you notice I'm taking the host, which is our base URL, and I'm putting in API auth, and then the auth endpoint, because that's where the wallet is going to call back to after it has signed the challenge. Got let's see, when I ran npx create next app at latest, I got npx not found. So this is probably because you don't have Node.js or npm. Because yeah, npm, npx, and node, they all come packaged together. It's really confusing. If I go to like, install node mac, yeah, I'll kind of get this main page here. It does take a few minutes to install node, sadly. And then does npx come with node, just to be sure. npx stand for node packets execute. Without even installing it. npx is installed automatically with npm version 5.2. Yeah, so it looks like it does come packaged with Node, so you should be able to just install Node. I know it does take a few minutes though, which stinks. But yeah, after that you will have npx. And I guess one other thing about npx is like inside of our project we'll say npm install, Axios, QR code, whatever. But npx is this global way to install or invoke packages. And so this has to do with pathing on your terminal and stuff like that. It can be really confusing, but npx actually does make it easier, and it is nice that it's bundled inside. So yeah, once you do have npx, you should be able to create next app at the latest. But yeah, this is another reason I guess why Replit is good. I should do more of these workshops in Replit soon. I love developer environments. So let's get back into the slides here. So we just created our challenge endpoint, and I think we mostly walked through it. Yeah, so we're having the wallet. The wallet is calling back to our auth endpoint where we'll authorize. we have our generate LNURL function here, which just takes encode LNURL from utils. So a lot of this is just kind of like setting up boilerplate, setting up how the stuff is going to be encoded and trying to write it out really clear here for you. So yeah, I think this code is pretty simple for the challenge endpoint. But next we're going to have the auth endpoint, auth.js. And if it'll let me click in here, oops. So we'll copy this and we will walk through this code here. So we have a function here up top. We'll look at this in a second, but it seems to be verifying something. And this is our actual API handler right here. So not too much is happening here. We see first and foremost, we're expecting these arguments to exist in the query. So once again, this is coming back from the Lightning wallet. This is what the user's Lightning wallet will be calling, the endpoint they'll be calling. And these are the arguments they need to have. Sig key, right? So we have our tag is going to be login. Our K1 is going to be the challenge essentially. The sig is going to be the signed challenge. And then the key is their public key, right? So we make sure that these variables are here, that they're in the rec.query, and then we try to verify the sig. So that's where we're using this function here, which is using the SCCP 256K1 library. So we're verifying the signature, and then we're just returning it. And so I think this returns, so if verify sig, yeah, this just returns a true or false. So if the sig is verified, we know like, okay, this information is valid. So at that point, we add it to pending. If you remember pending, it's our fake database here. So at the point that we know the wallet called back to us, it gave us the correct information because we authenticated it, we verified it cryptographically. So cool, this is all legit information. So now we can save it to our database. And we save it to our database, and then we will be able to give this session to the user after this point essentially. But from here, we just call back with a status of okay, and we send back the K1 and the pub key, just to let the wallet know that like, hey, this was a success. So now the wallet knows, we know it's a success, and there's one other endpoint here. I call this pending. Oh no. Pending. Here we go. So now we need to poll for this whole process to complete. It didn't make sense for me at first why we needed to do this. Like in theory, it didn't make sense, but once I was actually writing the code and it was not working, then I kind of realized like, okay, I don't know when this process is going to complete, right? Like I'm just throwing up the QR code. I don't know when the user is going to scan it until they call back to me and I verify it. Like, okay, then I know that they scanned it, but how do I necessarily like complete that full process inside of the endpoint where we authenticated it? I think there's probably a way to do it. I mean, there's probably a dozen ways to do it, but I didn't really find a way that was clean and a way that, you know, the client and the server could communicate here. And I also asked people that were better developers than me, like, what do you do? And everyone just said, I poll for it, which means I make an API request like every second and I ask for it once I know that the login flow is kicked off. And so this is our pending endpoint that we will be polling from the front end. And we'll kind of get to see all this in action. I know we're just pasting in code so far, but we'll get to see this in action in a minute here. So there we go. We now have all of our endpoints, and I already know next we're going to get into the client side. Oh, nope. First, we have the NextAuth.js. This is the biggest, and let me zoom in on this. This is the grossest code here, sadly. I didn't quite boil this down as much as I wanted to, but it's very standardized, at least. It's very generic in the sense that, like, This is just a way to get NextAuth to accept your Lightning login flow and then give you a session back with everything you need, right? So it's definitely something you can just take and run with. And this is the flow essentially that Stacker News uses. They use NextAuth, and a lot of this was was inspired by Stacker News and how they do it. So now inside of auth, I make this crazy looking file. That's another thing I forgot to mention, is we got this crazy looking file. I don't know why they have us name the file like that, but we do. So it's next auth closing bracket .js. And I'll paste all of this in, and we can walk through this pretty quickly. We're importing the library. We're importing this credentials provider, which is essentially like, hey, we're gonna do custom credentials. Instead of doing credentials through Google or something like that, we're gonna do it our own way. And so we have credentials provider, which allows us to do custom credentials, give it an ID and a name, and we tell it what we'll be expecting for credentials. We define it with a type and everything. After that, we basically pass through a series of callbacks. That we go into authorize first, and then authorize returns into JWT, and we save the pub key and the K1 into a JSON web token, and then from there it gets passed into the session, and then that token gets passed into the session, and then finally we redirect the user back to the home page or the sign-in page here. Oh, this should actually be just slash. Yeah. We redirect the user back, and they should see that they're signed in. So yeah, once again, like the other endpoint code, this will make more sense once we have our hands on this and are actually interacting with it, with the client. So I'm gonna make inside of source, I'm gonna make a components folder. Because we're gonna use this in a second for the LNURL-AAUTH component here. So this is the first part of this component that we're gonna build for LNURL-AAUTH, and this is gonna be the front end to everything that we've just been doing on the back end. So I'm gonna make LNURL-AAUTH.js. We'll paste that in. So this is the first part here. We're gonna continue on to the next slide, and we'll grab this, our part 2, and we can just paste it right below. Boom. And then we'll have a part 3. You can only fit so much code into a slide. And this is, yeah, just our return here below. Okay, there we go. Save that. It all looks good. There's no errors. And so what is happening in here? Basically, we have a use effect here, which fetches our LNURL. It fetches our initial challenge. We have this poll for verified response, right? This is where we're polling our pending endpoint, and we're trying to see like, hey, is data.k1 and is data.pubkey here? Because once it is, I'm ready to just sign the user in. And then we have this use effect here that fires once we have successfully finished pending and we have the K1 and the pub key. Then we call this sign in user, which is right up here at the top. And this is what actually passes the K1 and the pub key into NextAuth, right? So we're getting that sign in method from NextAuth here. And then once we have that, we can use our use session hook from NextAuth, and we just get everything we need from the user. The user's totally signed in. We can show that to them. We have different statuses for if it's loading, unauthenticated, or authenticated. And yeah, I mean, once it's all put together, it kind of just works. And you don't need to think about it too much. So let's run it. Let's see if it works. I know the styles will be a little bit ugly here, so I'm actually gonna I'm gonna go copy my globals inside of my example that I'd already built before today. I'll just paste that in, it shouldn't be too different. And I'm gonna do npm I again. I think we installed everything, yeah. Do npm run dev. Let's just see what it looks like. Oh, I added this component, but I need to put it inside of our index.js. So that's kind of the final thing here. So I'm gonna take this entire main, I'm just gonna empty it out, and I'll import LNURL-AAUTH, and I'll put that right here. Okay, cool. So it's showing me that it's not signed in, and I've got a QR code here. So, you know, I wonder what will happen if I just scan it. Right? Let's see. So back to the trusty Phoenix wallet here. I will scan it, and notice what it says here. If you can see, it's asking me if I want to sign in on localhost. And if I try and do this, I'm going to get a beautiful red error there. It says network error, check your internet connection. Well, the reason that it's saying that is because it signed the key instantly, and then it tried to call back, but it called back to localhost 3000, right? It needs to be able to call back to a globally available IP address. So this would work if I had this deployed to, you know, LNURL-AAUTH.dev or something. This would work if it was deployed, but right now it's just on my local host. And so this is where ngrok will help us. This really cool tool. Start your server and ngrok it. So that ngrok is a tool, you can install it for free. Sadly, it's kind of a dependency here to get the full flow tested. I mean, you either need ngrok or you need to deploy this project, which you can easily do on Vercel for free, right? But we're going to use ngrok because it comes in handy a lot during different kinds of Bitcoin Lightning dev stuff. So install ngrok. I've got a link to it here. You start your server, npm run dev. I just did that. And then we open up our terminal, and we're going to run this command. Npx ngrok http, and then we're going to point to our local host. So let's see what happens when we do that. And I actually need to, this should be, yes, that's not a part of the command. I put run in there. Cool, so open up new terminal here. I'll say npx ngrok http. So I'm calling ngrok using npx. I'm giving it the HTTP argument, which is basically telling it this is an HTTP server. And then now I'm going to give it the exact HTTP server that I'm using, which is localhost 3000. And now it will spin up 2 forwarding URLs for me. If you see this, it's just like my slide below here. It'll give me these 2 forwarding URLs, so I can take this bottom one with an HTTPS and copy it and visit this, and this will look just like my localhost. I mean, it's just a forwarding to my localhost. And cool, so now I've got this globally available, so we can try and sign this with my wallet again. So I go to the send again, you see my camera's open. I will scan this. We will look, and now we have our ngrok URL. It's so reflective. And I'm gonna hit my green button here. It's loading, there we go, and then boom. Instantly we pick it up, because we're polling, we instantly pick it up. We signed in the user, and then it called back to the wrong URL here, actually, it looks like. So let's see what happened. Because it's not detecting that we're signed in. Okay, it's telling us an invalid callback URL. Receive HTTP, blah, blah, blah. Cool. So I know exactly where this is. So this might have been different because I had this example formatted slightly different. But at least our wallet picked up the QR code. It signed it seems. It mostly got things right. So this is our redirect right here. So I'm just going to console log the URL. And yeah, let's see what our callback URL looks like. And we'll just go through this flow one more time. Luckily, it does only take a second. Sign in like this. Boom. We'll throw another error. Okay, let's see what we console logged here. Valid callback URL error. Didn't seem to console log it. Let's try this again. I think I need actually to generate a new challenge. So go to our ngrok. Now it'll generate a new challenge. It does generate a new challenge on load every time, which is good to know. So try that once again. Yeah, and we're not getting this console log. So let's see if we can do it without the redirect. The redirect isn't like necessary for this to function, but it will break things if it itself is broken. So go back here. Let's try that. Auth error still. Invalid callback URL error. HTTP. So even without the redirect, this is still firing, so this must be something else here. Do I have anything hard-coded that's HTTP and not HTTPS? Does not seem so. Let's see what it looks like in my example. Auth example. Next auth. Maybe let me copy exactly what's here. Wouldn't be a live workshop if something didn't break. All right. Okay. Let's go for this again. Signing in. There's a problem with the server configuration. Yeah, this is very strange. Add map. At this point, this basically is just like my example. So let me jump over to my example and let me see if this will work. If I npm run dev, I've got the same env. Actually, my env is emptied out. That's interesting. Don't save. So, and then this should still be forwarding, I believe. So let's try it. Scan this. Server configuration error. Valid callback URL. Am I maybe using the wrong Like, is this an HTTP instead of an HTTPS? Let's restart ngrok as well, because this is interesting. I've never run into this error before. Let's try that. Give it one more go here. Oh, just refreshed on its own. Okay, that was weird. Well, it recognizes that we're logged in now. Let's clear the session and try again. It's also continually refreshing here. So let's clear this, clear the session, clear the cookies. Okay, now we're not signed in. Are we running on 2 servers or something here? Yeah, this is craziness. Wow, okay. Let's shut this down temporarily. So I've got my env variables in here, npm run dev. Challenge, verify sig. Okay, new URL now. We're not signed in. Okay, it's also not going crazy. We see here we're console logging the session by default as well. Maybe that was causing this infinite loop. I don't know. We'll see, I guess. Let's try this one good last time. Log in. Call us back. And there we go. It works perfectly. Well, what the heck? What the heck happened then? Like, I did not even change any code. But we see here we now have we have this session which we can use anywhere and everywhere. It gives us our K1, which I guess acts as the, you know, scoped. This is this user's authorization for today, and then the pub key, which is like this is who this user is, essentially their username. And we're saving that, and it's going through the full flow there. So yeah, okay, a little bit of rough waters, but we got it to work in the end. I feel like this might have just been an environment thing, like maybe I had too many things running, and I somehow got myself into an infinite loop there, but you know, such is the case sometimes when you're developing recklessly. One last thing I want to show you all. Because this project is like, it's an example project, it's scoped a little bit weird. Something where you can really see this in action if you go to my repositories. I've got PlebPost template here. So this is one of the projects that I built for Bitcoin++. For my presentation, it's a Lightning app template. It has extremely thorough instructions. It's a full stack Lightning app template. Like, I'm showing you how to set up a database. I'm showing you how to set up your Lightning environment. And this project implements my exact LNURL-AAUTH flow, that I created. So we go source, pages, API, auth. You can see here it's got very much the same setup. This auth folder, you can just take this auth folder from somewhere else and just move it in. And so, yeah, definitely take a look at PlebPost. Use it as template for you to learn, develop, copy, whatever. And I guess you can get to see like a real login flow in action where with this app, you'll actually be able to sign in with your Lightning wallet and make posts, get tipped on them, tip other people. So it's pretty cool. The only thing different here is like I'm accepting more variables. That's it. There's more variables on the user. That's that's about the only thing different in this whole flow. But yeah, with all that said, I hear NextJS beginning to start behind me, so I should probably wrap it up here. But if you did come through today, thanks for showing up. I'll post this video soon, and I hope this is valuable. And definitely let me know, reach out to me on Discord, on Twitter, or whatever. If you're trying to go through this and you're having any trouble whatsoever, let me know. I'd be happy to help you. And like always, this code and all the other code I write, it's for free on GitHub, so go copy away. But yeah, thanks for coming to another workshop. I will sign off now, and yeah, that'll be